Welcome to another Bungie Ride Along. This is a great opportunity for us to explore the playable spaces in Destiny and learn some of the ins and outs of development from the talented people who created the places where we go and fight and defend humanity. I'm Deej, I'm your friendly neighborhood community manager, and today I will be your host. As you can see, for this ride along, we have chosen as our destination the Dreadnaught. Oryx's loot-filled fortress is full of secrets, and I've assembled just the fire team to reveal some of those secrets to you. So let's meet two developers who had a hand in working with our team to bring this space to life. Up first, this dashing hunter is senior designer Brian Frank. How you doing, Brian?
I'm great, thanks, Deej.
Yeah, lovely bow. Good to have you on the couch.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm the design destination owner for the Dreadnaught.
Yeah.
And collaborated with Andrew and other artists, building these spaces, getting them ready to lay in the activity content and the player experiences. And I'm responsible for the two missions that we're going to play today.
Okay, so we'll be playing two of those missions as the breadcrumb trail that will follow through the destination. You created the action, you created the combat, you created the missions that we go on as Guardians.
Exactly.
That's awesome, okay. And then to balance that out, this hulking titan is senior world artist Andrew Hops.
How are you doing?
I'm glad to have you on the show, man. Thanks so much for taking time out of making games to talk about some of the things you've created in the past.
Absolutely, I'm excited.
So talk to us a little bit about what a world artist does at Bungie and frame up your contribution to bringing the Dreadnaught to life for us.
Sure, I was the world art destination owner on the Dreadnaught. Just making sure we take those concepts and build playable spaces out of them that are just incredible.
Nice. Well, that's a good segue to our first concept, if we can put that up on screen for our audience at home.
Yeah, first concept up is our postcard shop for the Dreadnaught. If you've seen the other ride-alongs, you're familiar with the postcard. And a postcard, if you could describe a destination with a single sentence, the postcard will describe a destination with a single image. So this shot's really capturing the atmosphere, the mood, the palette, the architectural elements, the materials, and a lot of the visual language for what the Dreadnaught will be.
Yeah, so if we come back to our in-game shot, you can see how that actually translates to a playable space. I'm sure that longtime fans of Destiny and Bungie remember the first time they saw this image. You know, it's deeply alien, it's hideous, but it's beautiful. It's definitely the sort of thing that incites curiosity. You want to get in there, you want to kick some ass, and you want to plunder it for its treasures. Yes. And now here we are.
Can I jump in and say that these postcards are part of a destination incubation process that establishes both the visual goals and also the player experience goals for the destination. So you can imagine as a mission designer looking at this image and being inspired to build encounters and adventures within that environment.
And we're going to have many adventures and encounters as part of this exploration. But before we go, you have some more concept art to share with our audience, yeah?
Sure. We can pull up the next concept.
Okay. Next concept on main viewer.
Concept of the cinematic sky battle at the very beginning of the game. Setting up the setting, Hive Saturn rings.
And then if we come back to our in-game view, you probably want to give credit to, yeah? Like who created the space battle concept?
So that concept was by Jesse Van Dyke, and if we come back into game, you can see what Mark Goldsworthy's team did with that to set up the remnants of the battle on the Dreadnaught.
So we've got the burning wreckage of these husks, these old ships. You've got the Awoken fleet. You've got the Hive fleet. It's all just a wonderful, beautiful mess, yeah?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I love this as well because it's not only a exciting scene for the artist to paint, but it also is integral to the player experience. You know, the Dreadnaught is an environment that you wouldn't imagine Guardians are running all over, but you know, we knew we wanted to have those social elements and later introduce the public space gameplay. And so this fit nicely in with that. It gave an opportunity to create a mission that was about establishing that beachhead, opening the doorway for the Guardians that are going to later be running all around the Dreadnaught, and it sort of contextualizes that action and that player experience.
The player quite literally becomes the vanguard, because in the original Destiny, every place that we explored was a place that we were returning to on behalf of humanity, going back to reclaim lost worlds. But this Dreadnaught doesn't belong to us. So that was really a sense that you gave to me as a player, was when I first went to the Dreadnaught, dispatched sort of on a stealth mission by Cade, I'm the first person to go here. It made me feel far more important than I ever had in any other mission. It's good stuff.
We'll throw up one more concept here by Frank Capizzuto. And again, this is a concept for the opening cinematic. He's exploring the design of the lesser battleships for the Dreadnaught's fleet. Exploring what it would be like when it was destroyed and the pieces it could be made up of.
And then if you come back in-game, this is not an identical ship. This is one of those cutters that we see when we're exploring destinations on missions, but you can see that fragmented, almost like it's got a spine, almost like it's got a skeletal system.
Yeah, when they're designing that stuff, when Concept's designing this stuff, they're always thinking about how these things are built so you can really ground them in reality.
Fantastic. Or virtual reality, as it were. All right, so let's forge ahead, yeah? We're going to play some missions, we're going to explain some encounters, and we're going to see all sorts of different settings on board the Dreadnaught and talk about your process in bringing that stuff to the player. So you are our armed guards, you are our tour guides, so you're on point. Go ahead and lead off, and I'll frame everything up for the audience at home.
Yeah, and I'll jump in here and talk about this activity really being the establishing shot for the Dreadnaught player experience. So it has all those major elements that we're going to find repeated throughout the content that you experience on the Dreadnaught. So it's a foreboding and dangerous fortress. It's filled with secrets. It offers like endless opportunities to explore and discover rewards. And this first environment was intentionally built to establish that mood, right? Like
yeah, we set
about
up
it being open.
A large open space like this with not a lot of cover. It just makes you feel very isolated.
Yeah, and small. You guys feel tiny in here. Even just taking a few steps ahead of me, it feels like this place is going to swallow us whole.
Exactly, and the goal there is to, in this case, the pacing, and very intentionally, enemies are left out of this initial experience, and we want you to get acquainted with the environment and feel like you're free to explore it, but it also has some dangerous elements that you're going to want to be watching out for.
And no waypoint.
Yeah, exactly. So that was something that I was really excited about building this activity. Was the waypointing system is fantastic, but it's kind of a necessary evil. I really wanted in a player's first experience with this geometry to be reading it, looking at the art that was created, and navigating by sort of sight. And the waypoint, I think, can sometimes be kind of counterproductive to that because it just puts an exact pinpoint on where you need to go, and it sort of makes you wonder, like, well, how does the ghost know all this stuff? But
has this ghost been on this mission before?
Yeah, exactly. But we understand from a user research perspective that players can go about 30 seconds of being lost and be extremely frustrated. So we need that waypoint to bring you back to the player path. But I also wanted to give you an opportunity to explore without it and not feel like you're being led by the nose through the activity. So if you progress at a good pace, you're never actually going to see that waypoint, and it's just going to let you discover the environment and the objectives naturally, organically.
So I've played a number of first-person shooters as a gamer where I would get lost. I'm looking for a key, I'm looking for a door, I'm looking for more bad guys to fight. And is there anything that you can do from a world art perspective to kind of draw their eye to lead them to where it really is that they should be going?
Right, so you can see what our lighting team did here. Really strong light coming out of that hallway is just going to naturally lead the player to that door without having to force it down your throat. Yeah,
that's sort of the in-game representation of the waypoint. It's calling out, this is the player path. And there's an interesting psychological side effect of that. I'm sure many gamers have experienced this. Like the minute that you understand where you think the game wants you to go, it sort of frees you to leave that path and go and discover for yourself what may be hidden or lurking elsewhere in the environment.
So there are many paths that you can take. The Dreadnaught basically invites and rewards exploration.
Yeah, we just packed that stuff into the environment wherever we could. I mean, I even at one point created a list for every environment. I wanted to make sure that there was multiple off the beaten path areas that you could discover, find a reward, and then and the investment team comes in and they make those rewards real for players. It's awesome.
All right. Well, there is a path that you've determined. So we're going to follow that path, and we'll venture deeper inside the Dreadnaught. You guys are on point, so lead the way. I'm on your 6 hops.
Follow Brian in here.
Okay, following Brian.
Yeah, this was, again, really exciting for me, like wanting to introduce this mysterious element of you have a path that's removed and the player's left to discover a way across this challenge. Again, highlighting the Dreadnaught as this, it's testing you, it's not a friendly environment.
No.
And the thing that we did here, which I really loved, was we took the Ghost and we gave it the ability to reveal these invisible platforms. Okay? And these platforms have 2 very simple properties. They're invisible, but your Ghost can highlight them, and they're created when you get close to them, so they're created by proximity. So one thing that the artist did, the lighting team, added this light down here, which sort of lures you to one of the first platforms, and you sort of organically discover it. And that gives an opportunity for a player that their first intuition may not be to bring out the Ghost.
Yeah.
They can still find this pathway across.
It also makes the Ghost a little bit more interesting than it was, yes?
Yeah, exactly, and this is another theme you'll see later in the mission. Really wanted the Ghost to feel like it enabled actions for the players, instead of leading you to a point and interacting with an object and having it just progress the mission. Like here, you still have to cross the chasm, you still have to navigate this sort of terrifying narrow beam that's being created and destroyed in front of you.
It's a leap of faith.
Yeah, by dark magic. And the Ghost is assisting you in that, and it's giving you additional information that you have to use to complete the puzzle.
Yeah. I gotta say, I don't really have a fear of heights in real life, but Destiny gives me a sense of vertigo all the time, like sweaty palms in the vault of glass. You guys are killing me with that. All right, so we've crossed the chasm. The Ghost has revealed itself to be a more interesting utility than just let me scan this and then defend me while I do my work. And so we're obviously evolving the way people play Destiny with the introduction of the Taken King. What's next?
Well, so when we build spaces like this, where it's just wide open, as players ourselves, we are thinking, like, I want to go explore out there. So one of the goals when we were building the Dreadnaught was to really push the boundaries of the maps. So we end up with secrets like these ones where we brought in Ghost Link bridges to help players explore outside the normal play space. Yeah,
it was very intentional that pathway leads you sort of to the center or to one end of the far platform, because it sort of suggests you're going to continue forward, but if you backtrack, we've gone to the trouble of adding the secret that you can find and explore. And this also is interesting. These bridges have a really nice property, the proximity nature of them, where if I float it out into space, it's not going to reveal itself when you walk up.
Yeah.
So it's sort of one tier of greater complexity and difficulty that's layered in for the adventurous player to go and discover a reward.
And then so you do go as far as to tuck a reward up there so that the adventurous player, like my eye is automatically drawn to this little piece of light all the way in the distance. Looks like we've got a culver or a little cave opening we can go in. So if I can make it there, if I'm clever enough to get there, I get something for my trouble.
Sure. Exactly, and that's critical. Like we want to have that loop, the mystery, the curiosity, the exploration, and then the thing that brings it back is the reward. And wherever possible, we put the best rewards we can give.
Cool. All right, moving right along.
Yeah.
I'm behind you, Brian.
And again, here I'll just talk quickly about this relatively simple design element here, where you're led into what's essentially a dead end at first glance. And as you begin to look around and explore the environment, you see a couple things. There's strange worms, and there's more space that looks like, it's probably playable space.
Yeah.
And it's just a real simple navigational challenge where, as you leave this dead end, you're going to hopefully notice this opening here that on your way in you don't actually have direct line of sight to.
Yeah, you obscured my vision with this
Exactly.
pile here.
And so this was carefully constructed to make players really feel like, oh, I discovered this route. It wasn't immediately obvious, and then there's a moment where they're not really sure where to go, but relatively quickly they discover the path forward. There's some enemies in here too that can draw your eye, and your radar can clue you into to where you're supposed to be.
It's pretty uncool. We're trying to lead a guided tour here, and they just won't stop.
Yep. It also is the first time an activity leads you through these these interior wall spaces. We call them grub caves internally. That's an official term for those spaces.
Sure.
And
you guys always have your own pet names for certain creatures or certain spaces or certain player devices.
Exactly. And those are interesting. They came on sort of late in the lifespan of the Dreadnaught. Andrew and I talked about, wanting to have as many of these exploratory spaces as possible, and went to the trouble of adding them everywhere that we possibly could fit them in, given our layout and our memory constraints and whatnot.
And that's more of that desire to explain how these ships were built and what they're made up of.
Yeah, it's got a very organic feel. It's like you sort of can see secreted residues, and you can see, like just these faces here. It feels very bone-like.
Yeah, it provides a sense of alternate navigation where we try to define the space that you imagine the AI would use to actually navigate their environment. And then there are these auxiliary areas that you feel like you're behind the walls or sneaking into forbidden territory, essentially. It can be a really cool player experience.
Nice.
So yeah, then again, quickly here, I'll talk about these bridges. This is like an escalation of the concept of the bridges. Because they're found in many environments, I really wanted players to understand it. And so this is like a blocking challenge. Like, you can't get through this without having the ghost reveal the next platform to you. Whereas in the first case, you could just walk along it. Here you're actually required to jump.
And fall.
There you go.
There you go.
There's
I died.
There's a hard road and an easy road.
I got a different depth of field than I enjoy at home. So there you go. Thanks for the revive. All right, catching up. So you increased the difficulty a little bit, yeah? Like the first bridge system, we just sort of we were able to just walk across. This one has a little bit more danger.
Exactly.
Was that motivated by the team? Was that something you got like discussing about this? Like,
yeah, I mean, it was somewhat controversial internally, and I always kept a real close eye on it from our user research group. They would bring externals in, run them through the content, and the thing that I found is that in open-ended comments about the player experience, people would talk about how much they loved that the Ghost was a tool and a utility, and I felt like that benefit outweighed the potential frustrations of some players that had trouble with the jumping.
Yeah.
And we tried to position them so that the jumps are relatively easy. It's not a darkness phase. If you die, there's no real punishment for failure other than having to try again. So I tried to find that balance.
So
there.
the debate to sustain that is more than just looking at your fellow designers and saying, get good. It's like, I've got research, I've got data, we've had people play this, we want to challenge the
That's
player.
a critical part of what activity designer does, is factoring that. So here again, I'll just keep going with this design components. This is we call them core nodes or shroud nodes. I don't remember the exact internal title, but here again, you're at a point where you're going to progress the mission, and this object is shielded, and you have to use your ghost to interact with it. But it doesn't actually solve the problem for you. It simply enables another action that you have to actually do yourself.
And a shared team activity. We turn into a firing squad all the time, right?
Exactly, yeah, and that's a great secondary element where when you're with the fire team, you have that timing game of like ready, 1, 2, 3, go.
Yep, and we got bad guys.
It meets that Destiny pillar of fun with friends. And this is a turning point now in terms of the pace and the activity. We've shifted a little bit away from the exploration component to now encountering enemies. And up here, we can head out this way and talk about introducing a new enemy type and what sort of considerations go into that.
Okay. On you.
Yeah, so Hops, if you want to engage these guys, it's the first time you're going to see the Taken Acolyte and their eye, this turret that they can summon. The Acolytes are great. Their base sort of behavior and weapon loadout is great for bunkering and holding positions. And their new ability that they acquire as Taken just further turns them into, it takes them from being a hard point to a fire base. So now they have this force multiplier that they can bring and put pressure on players that are trying to move into their space. So you can see them here arrayed on this bridge, and they're opposing us. And from a geometry and gameplay standpoint, there's this really nice choice you can make. You go left or right, and doing either basically invalidates their cover. And then you have this sight line here where you can just kind of come in and fish in a barrel and feel like you outsmarted them. And that's a big part of what goes into all the considerations of the encounters. As a designer, you have to take the role of general or commander in a way. Like you could think of a real-time strategy game where the enemy, we want to place them in a manner that makes them feel tactically intelligent and strategically plotting against the players.
And you get to think for the enemy then.
Exactly.
You get to be the puppet master, you get to put the pieces on the board and say, when they come into this space, I'm going to help the Hive fight the Guardians by, hello. Open fire, weapons free,
Oh, yeah, I forgot.
reloading.
There you
Okay.
go.
So I don't know if you guys have been collecting your calcified fragments, but the Books of Sorrow explains that the daughters of Oryx are the ones who built these weapon systems. That
The
was
same daughters that we face in the raid.
in the King's Fall raid, yeah.
Yeah. And the Spec Ops team, when they built that asset, I know there was a very intentional desire to unify the design language. It appears to have the same taken effects language as other effects.
Yeah.
That those
You got
games-
screen effects. We're obviously surrounded by some black, bad magic, some bad juju, if you will.
We can
beautiful.
go check out the Court of Oryx real quick. I've got another concept from Frank Capizzuto.
Okay, let's put that up on screen. We have our statues, our totems, if
All
you
right,
will.
So this was exploring the player interactable for how the Court of Oryx would summon the Hive combatants. And we can talk a little bit about some of the lore behind that. So of course there's Hive intaken around the Dreadnaught who drop sigils, and those sigils are basically a way for those Hive intaken to communicate with high-ranking Hive. So once a player acquires it, they're opening this portal into Oryx Throne Realm
And if we come back to
summoning
the
them.
game view, here they are fully realized in game. So you work pretty closely with concept artists. It's not just a matter of concept artists making a few sketches, giving you a postcard and say, go make a video game.
Sure.
It really seems to me in the conversations I've had with you guys that you work in pretty close proximity to each other in lockstep throughout the realization of these spaces, you know, and your creative processes evolve together.
Yeah, do you have another concept of this environment?
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, we've got an early concept for the Court of Oryx, exploring what the layout might have been like.
Yeah. There's some differences here. I see you've got
Absolutely.
some crystals up here
Yeah.
in the upper left-hand corner.
I think this started as an activity concept. We knew we wanted in the public space for Guardians to come together and fight these bosses and take on challenges as a group in a way that they hadn't done before. And so that necessitated an environment to do that in, and that's when we go to the artists and start the conversation about how big is it, what form factor does it have, and then onto the concept team to realize that.
And there's one more concept, the color version of that, the color pass. All of those are by Frank Capizzuto. And you can see at one point we were really sticking with the crystal obelisks as the interactable to summon champions, but
Then things change in development.
yeah.
Things go away. If you actually come back to the in-game view, you can see that those crystals got replaced with your summoning gate here, yeah?
Yeah.
Right, so because those obelisks are kind of seen all around the Dreadnaught, it could be confusing. So we went back and designed a new interactable, which became the statues, and now those have one clear purpose.
Yeah, and this gate is an element that is repeated and players see through different activities. It's interesting, we just triggered this event where one of the actual Court of Oryx bosses makes his cameo in this story activity. And I could talk a little bit about this. The space that we're in is later used as a public space, so it has a very non-linear and sort of open layout, which feeds right into that design goal of having the Dreadnaught destination feel explorable and offer players with choices of what they're going to do and where they're going to go. So when I was building this activity, I knew that this event type was planned, and I talked to the designer responsible and said, you know, if there were going to be a preview of Court of Oryx, you know, what would you want that to be? And this is who he gave me.
So a player on their
Fanatic of
first
Crota.
mission aboard the Dreadnought, are they able to kill this? I mean,
That's
it's
a good question.
An echo of Oryx, right? It's a fanatic.
Yeah, he leaves.
Oryx is dead, but it's sort of like a remnant of Oryx, yeah?
Yeah, I don't know. I want to say it's impossible to kill him, but who knows? I mean,
Who knows,
I wouldn't be surprised if a high-power fire team could stun him and kill him.
They never fail to surprise us, do they?
Wouldn't shock me. So yeah, and that is just an example of like a non-gear reward, a player experience reward for coming out to the center of this bubble and leaving the beaten path. You know, and this is, I think, a really interesting vantage point. You can see all of the different avenues inside, all the spaces and how they're connected. And a player that maybe doesn't feel really confident in the platforming, the jumping game, they don't have to come this way. They can take a walkable path. They never have to leave the ground, and they can still make it to their objective. But then it sort of meets players where they are. If you have a lot of experience with the jumping stuff and you want to make the shortcut, it's there for you to discover.
Here I come. All right, I'm with you guys again. Where to next?
This is the last of the 3 nodes that we destroy.
Ah, yes.
And I don't know if I mentioned this earlier, but you can destroy these in any order. Again, reinforcing that player choice design goal. And this space introduces another one of our new combatants, the Taken Wizard.
Angry Wizard.
Yeah.
Dead Wizard.
First time you see him, he's just a standard wizard, and there's a little bit of a twist here. You go through the motions again. You've done this twice already. You think you kind of know what to expect. You're going to scan this and open it up and destroy it. But when you initiate the scan, it closes and another wizard spawns. Gives us a chance to see this combatant again and explore his powers and what it's like to face him.
And introduce him to a Fist of Havoc.
Exactly. So you see him summoning the Shadow Thrall, and there's a bit more resistance in terms of reinforcement waves. This is kind of like a mini climax encounter, where it really isn't intended to provide a ton of challenge, but more give that combatant introduction experience.
Yeah, your experiences with the Hive and the Taken are escalating, and that isn't specific to this node. That encounter happens.
Yeah, regardless of what order you do it in, it's always the last one.
It's always the third
so
one.
So it can appear in any of the 3 spaces.
All right, I'm going to scan.
Yeah,
Get ready to open fire.
Let's do it.
It's vulnerable. There you go. Boom, and done.
No problem.
Good job, fellas. Okay, fantastic. Where to next?
We can head this way.
Following you.
We're going to go behind the walls again. So before we head in here, we've got another concept. This one by Dorje Bellbrook. So this is when we were exploring surface materials for the Hive.
Yeah.
You can see some of the inspiration for that. Shark teeth. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, organic elements, teeth,
yeah.
bone.
So we're thinking of bone and enamel and
some crystalline
the
elements
onyx,
too.
yeah.
It gets shiny. And then you've got not a banana, but a little thrall for scale.
Happy little thrall.
Happy little thrall. And then we can see those textures at work as we move through this space, yes?
Sure. And before we step through here, we'll
Do you
actually...
want to move up to the next spot that's lit?
Oh yeah, sure. We'll go in deeper.
We must go deeper.
Yeah, I love this light, sort of a beacon, drawing you into this, otherwise, a place you probably would not choose to go.
Follow the light. There's peace in the light.
So we got another concept of the material exploration. You can see the barnacle growth, almost fungal growth on the walls, and that became a lot of what you see here in game.
If you come back into the game, there it is right there.
So when we were building this, we were thinking about how the ship would have been built. So you've got this surface material, almost like a skin, and behind that turns into this kind of porous rock, and that shard.
Some of the more organic elements of the ship behind the plating.
Barnacle-y shard.
Yeah. Some nice energetic crystals to light your way.
The incubation for the destination talked about it being older than time and really wanting that sort of accumulation and layering to be a tangible component of the environment.
And as you're in here, we're reminding you that you're not on the surface of a planet, you're inside of a ship. So we've got these structural elements intruding on these cave-like spaces. Here you can see where lighting team did a cool job bringing in some caustic lighting off of that crystal.
So yeah, we've got reflections on the wall. This is the source. So the light from this source passes through the crystal, almost like a prism.
Right.
Cool. Oh, where'd you go? Where'd you guys go? Don't leave me alone in the dark.
Follow Hops.
Okay.
Yeah, and I can just jump in again and talk about how, like, working with Hops to lay out these environments initially, I actually didn't know what was going to be in them. I just insisted that there be as many as possible. And then the other design teams, the public space team, investment teams came in and populated them with all the puzzles and secrets that people enjoy discovering in the patrol activity.
Right. These spaces all just stem from that desire to push exploration.
Where are you taking me?
So next up, we're going to move into a more sort of the finale here that becomes a more combat focused. And we have a bit of a reveal as we transition to the next space.
Before we head through here, as I was saying, we wanted players to feel like they were on a spaceship, but it's a tomb ship, and it's cavernous, and there's a lot of organic materials.
Mm-hmm.
So to prevent you from feeling like you were inside of a planet, we bring in these very tech-heavy aspects.
Yeah. This is where Oryx gets his cable TV, yeah?
Yep.
Actually, what are these wires? Does this power the primary weapon? This is the gun that we're coming in here to disarm?
Definitely.
Maybe.
Maybe. Okay.
No one knows.
All right, we don't have a schematic.
Yeah, it's also a great showcase of, even in a destination that's essentially fully enclosed, we
Yeah.
wanted to have a delineation between open and like exterior and interior space. Because that's part of the design language that the public space team used to distinguish the private dungeons to the public areas where you're going to encounter other Guardians. So we'll see other examples of that later.
All right. All right, lead us on.
Let's go.
Shortcut.
Okay, so I'm following you, Brian, but Hops just took a shortcut, so once again, there's more than one ways to get where you need to go.
Yeah.
Inviting exploration, rewarding people to find their own path. These were all themes that you guys explored
Definitely.
as you moved through this space as artists.
Even when we're connecting one space to another, having an opportunity to make a simple choice about how you're navigating is really important for players to have that sense of autonomy.
I've got another concept to put up here.
All right, let's
This
check
one
that out.
by Jesse Van Dyke.
Jesse Van Dyke, awesome.
So in this concept, he's exploring, obviously, when the Cabal ship impacted. This is one of the Cabal ship from the mission on Phobos, took off from Phobos, and Primus Tau-Un and his Bond brothers came in here, plowed their ship right into the Dreadnaught.
Punched a hole right through space.
Yeah, so this concept, obviously, you see the chaos. That's right after it happened. And by the time the Guardians arrive, the fires have smoldered. It's just
So we'll come back to
smoke
our
and
in-game view.
embers.
You can see, you can see things are still sort of smoldering and burning. Not completely ablaze. It would be a little difficult to come into a combat space if everything was on fire. I don't think we'd last very long.
Our effects artists had a heart attack when they saw that concept.
That's
But
a lot of
luckily-
fire, you guys.
Luckily, that's not when we come here.
All right, so we come into this large cavernous space. We see there's obviously a fight underway that has nothing to do with us. We can
Yeah.
get involved if we want.
I love looking at this concept now that the game is done and all the pieces have been put into place, because like I almost feel like this was conceived of just what could be the most audacious thing we could do. How about we slam one ship into another and create this rubble-strewn battlefield? And I think at the time that was created, we didn't really know who the Cabal were or what exactly their motivation was. And for players, this moment is still wondering about those exact things. And the activities that they play on the Dreadnaught will begin to peel back those layers and let them understand what's going on. And the narrative team, the story guys, they did an awesome job of fitting all those pieces together. I think the ship actually has a name. You saw it in the opening mission, take
Right.
off from the battlefield. So again, it's completing that loop. And this environment, I love this environment and the way it's laid out for players. It has those multiple avenues. You can really pick your path through this rubble field, and there are little combat vignettes scattered throughout where the Cabal are fighting the Hive, and you have an opportunity to come in as a third party and
Raise some hail.
yeah, watch them fight a little bit and look at how the combatants interact, and then also pick your spot to take them down.
Yeah, there's so many different pockets. This is actually my favorite place to bring gunsmith weapons. if I'm ranking up gunsmith weapons, because it's such a target-rich environment, different types of targets, and if I'm only hunting Hive, you know, I've got a nice secluded place to do that. If I'm hunting Cabal, I know I got a nice endless supply of Cabal, and you know, the Taken just appear wherever they want to.
Yeah, there are a couple main combat zones. Like there's obviously this area up where I'm at,
Coming to you.
by the Cabal ship.
Yep.
And we do a lot in architecting, collaborating between Andrew and I, making sure that these zones where combatants are going to be fighting are separated, because what we don't want is players to be standing in any one given spot, engaging a group of enemies, and some other group of enemies that they're not necessarily concerned about is, you know, taking shots at them from the side.
Yeah.
Right? So a bunch of that collaboration that we do is surrounds that design challenge of how do we keep sightlines open so players have a big vista and they can see a lot of the space, but still bisect and segment the environment into separate encounter pockets.
If you want to head over here, Deej, I'll
you.
I'll point out some of what he's talking about.
Okay, cool. Yeah, we'll just sort of take a look at the room in Crossfire.
Right, so we're selling this composition of the Cabal ship Impact with all of these pillars that are all pointing in the same direction, bent over.
Yeah.
But all of the pillars that are in the gameplay space are very intentionally placed. So if you look at these pillars over here where I'm shooting,
Yep.
Each one of those is functional cover. We put stuff down at the base of them so that combatants can use them as cover.
And
then
us
you've got
too.
this-
Guardians need cover too, you know.
Sure. And then the rubble pile I'm standing on is
Yeah.
acting to divide that encounter space from the encounter space over the trench where the Cabal are fighting the Hive.
Mm-hmm.
And again, divided by this rubble pile here. So all of these are very intentional, even though they make up a great composition.
Yeah, and we'll come back to that trench in the next activity. The public space designers have their own set of design goals and requirements, if you will, that inform how we build these spaces for particular activity types.
Mm-hmm. And you did build public spaces into the Dreadnaught, even though, you know, like you were saying before, the Dreadnaught isn't overrun with Guardians, but if we are infiltrating this, if we're taking the fight to the Taken, you still get to have those chance encounters with other players that sort of defines the Destiny experience,
Yeah,
yes?
exactly.
All right.
You guys want to plant that?
I'm going to plant my flag. Now, we've seen these flags in so many different destinations, but this was the first time we actually got to feel responsible for the fact that one was there. So I get to do something special. All of humanity benefits.
Right, we are the pioneers on the Dreadnaught.
And there is my badass dead orbit Fermi Solution starship. Look upon my riches and weep.
Exactly, yeah. So this is a great opportunity both for players to feel like they've made a significant contribution to the advancing the narrative of the story, right? They're opening the Dreadnaught for business, for Guardians, and then we fly the ship in as a like sort of a cinematic moment. This is a visual reward. You get to see your ship that you've invested time in collecting and see it in the world. I just think that's an exciting opportunity for players. We want to do that as much as we can.
And now the Cabal seem to have themselves an RV.
Yeah, so I can talk about this again from an encounter standpoint. Wanting to escalate this mission to a climactic finale encounter, and one of the tools in the toolbox that I decided to pull out was this tank, which proposes some interesting design challenges. Like for one, it's built for 3 players to fight, and on any given story mission, we have to assume that there likely will be one player taking on this challenge. So part of what I did with that was introduce these ammo crates. And those are great. They do a number of things to the player experience here. One, they give you that edge against the tank that you're going to need if you're fighting alone. And secondly, they hopefully pull you away from the landing zone where you might otherwise be tempted to just sit back and pick off the enemies. And lastly, the order that they're created and the actual position that they're placed in are going to pull the Guardians away from the Hive counterattack that comes from the opposite direction in this space partway through the encounter.
Yeah, it gives me a good place to fight.
Yeah, and that Hive counterattack then is important from the standpoint of, again, providing an escalation within this encounter, and then it also, the Ogre and the tank will start to fight each other, and they'll sort of draw the attention of the tank, which will divert it, and it'll reveal its undamaged sections to a player where otherwise if they were fighting it alone, it might be hard to circle around behind it because it's always trying to face you.
Nice. We did it.
That's
Oh,
good.
don't grieve. We did a good job. Come on your feet. On your feet. There you go. All right, we are going back to orbit. The show's not over. We've got one more mission to play. We've got more of the Dreadnaught to see. This will be a momentary station break. And we'll also get a chance to take a look at how the approach to this destination is different. We're used to flying over planetary scapes. We're used to our ships and seeing, you know, the atmosphere of the planet and the ground rushing by. But the Dreadnaught is a very different type of beast, isn't it?
Right, it's not actually on the planet, we're out in the rings, so we get to fly along Saturn's rings.
Regicide, yes, Brian?
Correct.
And we'll go for launch.
We'll throw up another concept here while we land.
Okay.
This one's by Adrian Myshak, and he's basically establishing what the Dreadnaught is going to look like on a macro scale. You can see there's some Cabal ships down there too, so maybe this was the mission from Phobos and ended up being where Primus Tau'n
Punched right
impacted
through,
his
yeah.
Cabal ship into the Dreadnaught.
We got 4 ships on approach. Conceivably, only one made it through.
Right.
Past their defense grid. But if we dissolve back to in-game, we're on approach. Instead of a planet's surface, we've got the rings of Saturn, so we're in the middle of deep space. Fighting aboard an enemy capital ship. And here we are again. And action. Here we go.
This is where you make your spoiler alert.
Spoiler alert,
Yeah.
friends at home, this is the last mission that takes place as part of the Taken King campaign aboard the Dreadnaught. Obviously, the raid is the pinnacle of your experience, but if you have not finished your Taken King campaign, you are invited to leave now, or have your experience spoiled. We'd be happy to spoil your experience for you. That said, who am I following?
Yeah, we'll run down through this trench here.
Okay.
I alluded to this earlier.
Trench run.
Having safe routes for players that are trying to collect materials and maybe don't want to
So-
constantly be engaging with enemies, it's one of the principles of the public space design. So
Yeah.
we made sure in laying out this environment that we had those opportunities, those routes where players can effectively avoid the combatants. If they have an objective in a specific bubble, they can get there quickly and do what they need to do.
Okay.
And then again, in this transition actually used to be more or less a series of hallways, right? Hive interior, and that was something that the public space team took a look at and asked us to try and improve upon. And so we instead made it that you're alongside the hull of the Cabal ship here where it's punched through.
Yeah.
Which does a couple things. For one, it retains that sense of being outside because there's another structure here that you're outside of. It's visual storytelling, and it gives you more information about the Cabal ship and what happened.
You can see the hull is scored by all the wreckage that it grazed past. And you've moved past me, so I'll catch up.
It's also helping orient the player as they move into the next bubble.
Yeah, because you've got that blue machine environment on the left, and then the rubble on the right.
Yeah, create sort of a north star so they can to say, I'm on the left, on the right. You got him? You got him? You good? You good?
Yeah, while we clear these out, I can sort of talk about this activity and its goals. The design director, the design lead for the project came to me and basically laid out a plan for like a boss, almost like a boss rush experience.
Who was that specifically, the design director?
Luke Smith.
Luke Smith.
Conversations with Luke. He came to me and said, this activity, we're going to have 2 ultra boss encounters. Initially, I was like, man, you're crazy. That's too much. We've never done that. But I think that was the right way to go. And it feels right for the culminating activity in the story campaign. We're really trying to present Oryx as a threat and make this feel like an achievement for players to overcome these obstacles.
Nobody touched the rupture.
Okay.
Nobody touched the rupture. Copy rupture. We're not going to go through there yet. We have some fun things to talk about first.
Let's jump into another concept here.
Okay.
This one by Ryan Demita.
Yeah.
And this was when Ryan's exploring the architectural language of the Hive architecture. You can see it's very Gothic inspired, spiny, bony.
And if we come back to our in-game view, that's how it's realized by the World Art team. Yeah, very skeletal in nature. Where'd the rupture go? Okay, there we go.
And
So by this point in time, we have returned to the Hellmouth. We have used what remains of Crota to become Ascendant, and eventually we're going to go through that portal for some of our final encounters with Oryx. But there's still more fun to say about this space before we do that.
Sure,
So,
we've got another concept here by Darren Bacon. This was the view of the front of the Cabal ship. You start understanding its relationship to the other bubble here.
you can go ahead and pull us back into the game view, and that's how it's realized. It's actually hard to get a good vantage point of all of the Cabal ship. You can see sort of the two tines that reach forward and then sort of the center structure. But it's such a massive thing that you've created, it's hard to frame it up with one view.
So when we're building this space, we are thinking about how it might have looked before the impact of the Cabal ship. And if you come on down here, one of the ways we're doing that is we create this sequence of architectural elements, and then we break that sequence where the ship impacted. You can see all these pillars that have been knocked over suggest they would have been repeating from this element over here.
Almost like falling dominoes.
Right.
Interesting.
Yeah, and from a design standpoint, from a activity perspective, I love the Cabal ship in here because it gives us another box that players want to get inside of.
Yeah, absolutely.
They encounter it in these first missions. They don't have any access to the interior, and hopefully it's obvious that paths lead into it, and players are wondering, when am I going to get to go in there? How am I going to get inside?
That's a big door.
What rewards lie beyond?
Which makes the strike where you actually do get to infiltrate their ship all the more of a triumph, right? Cool. All right, up next.
So instead of going through the rupture, we're going to dip into another bubble real quick.
Okay.
I believe it's the fountains, right?
So before the story team comes in and gets to have their way with the things that you're creating, you adopt all of these names for things inside the game. Is it jarring for you guys when you actually start playing with people who don't work at Bungie? And you're like, okay, let's come over here to this space. And they're like, what? And you're like, oh, yeah, that wasn't the shipping name.
Yeah, a lot of working titles. Okay.
Yeah, as developers, we spend years or a year with the internal names, so when they get swapped out for the real things, I'm often embarrassed that I can't, I don't know the actual shipping title of the activity that I built.
Yeah. You don't know your own game?
Yeah.
I got another concept for you in here.
Okay, let's bring it up.
By Dorje Belbrook.
Nice.
This is pretty cool. So he's exploring the shape language of the hive architecture aboard the Dreadnaught.
Slanted ceilings.
Get some suggestions of how it'd be decorated. You see the growths on the floor and the webbing or torn cloth.
And I've got that framed up in game, so you can see how that translates to the final product. And we've got these cells that have been hung from the ceiling. What's the lore behind that?
Right. So I believe that this area is meant as a hive prison, and inside these prison cells we've got hive combatants, or excuse me, combatants of the hive that
Oryx's
they've
enemies.
captured and kept in here. But we can go into another concept here by Dorje.
Okay.
So here's exploring what those cells would look like. You can see they're embedded in the walls. If we come back to game now, we've got some that are out in space and some that are embedded in the walls.
Yeah, Deej, if you want to look down here, there's one down below us.
Yep.
Went to the trouble of making the covering on those prisons destructible in some cases.
Yeah, I just blew a door off of one of them.
Exactly. So another opportunity
Have
for
a
you
grenade.
to.
He doesn't like that grenade. Let me finish him off. There you go. You can finish him off with your grenade.
Yeah. So,
So if I shoot the door off that thing,
some of them will destroy, and the offering the opportunity for hidden stuff in there as well.
cool. I'm following you, still following.
All right. Got another concept for this area. This one
Caverns.
is again by Dorje Belbrook. You can see it's changed from the concept a bit, but most of the architectural elements are there.
Yeah.
You see the prisons up above. If you look up, you see some of those prisons.
And then this is something I actually didn't notice until I played with you guys. Let's come back to our in-game view.
So I knew that made it into the PvP map, the dungeons, but actually, I gotta admit, playing, I didn't even notice that it was right up above us. If you look directly up, he is flying around, checking on all these prisons. We call him the Warden.
That's an actual sentient being.
Sure.
Making sure no one escapes.
Yeah,
And then we've, of course, got this device in the center as well, which was meant almost as some kind of a torture device. If you think about it, you can see there's some prison doors right here, so perhaps there's combatants inside there.
Yeah.
And it's also got qualities like a clock, almost like it's a slow tick.
Yeah.
Right? Imagine being in a prison cell and hearing that all day.
Like a tilted world that just never, ever ends. I think there's a special place in hell.
All right, we can head back.
Yep, follow me. We can take a long way back. There's another grub cave over here.
Okay.
Can slip through.
Let me catch up, bros.
Yeah.
And I like these because you feel like you're breaking the normal bounds of the map.
Yeah. The space is interesting too, sort of the history of it. It originally had the front of the Cabal ship in it. And when it came time to evaluate how this was working, it was decided that it was just too much overlapping spectacle, basically, and that we made the decision to pull it out of this space and put it into the neighboring one that we just looked at, so that each of those environments could be more focused on that singular element. So in this case, it's the prison aspect, the warden, the torture device, like all those things have room to
Where the hell did you guys go?
Up, and out.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and then the previous level that we're in, that it becomes more about the destruction caused by the Cabal ship. That was no small feat for you to rebuild what was basically half of this environment, right, and pull that out.
Among many world artists, yeah.
So we are on our way back now to the Rupture, and we're going to go take the fight to Oryx. Is that the plan?
Let's do it.
A lot of cells. These are also cells? This is where we started.
They've been coasting the galaxy for millennia, just accumulating.
That's a lot of enemies. That's a lot of guys that need to get put in jail. Aboard your ship older than time. Older than time itself. So these chains hanging from the ceiling, this is how Oryx says decorative chandeliers.
Sure, just include some meat hooks in there to remind you.
That he's a bad guy. And some banners too, so that it's not completely Spartan, it's not completely grotesque everywhere, right? I mean, you even give me maybe a hint of crimson.
So one more thing we can go check out real quick. Again, this space out here, when we initially built it, those platforms out there were purely decorative. And we immediately said, well, as a player, I want to go out there and explore. Mm-hmm. And we pulled in the Ghost Link bridges and made a little puzzle out here so that players could have some fun doing that.
It was almost like, yeah, we can't let players out there. And then we sort of asked the question, like, well,
Why?
Why not? Like, let's try it and see what happens. Because we knew it would be extremely rewarding.
Yeah.
And I think this jumping section represents the pinnacle of the Invisible Bridge challenge.
Well, there you go. For you puzzle jumpers out there, prove yourself. This is where you want to come.
The gift of the worm.
The gift of the worm? Tell me more.
Well, there's a chest out there that maybe requires some special ability.
Maybe.
You guys ready to head through the Rupture?
Let's do it.
All right. Yep. Yes, sir. And I'm following you.
So yeah, we're on track here, finding Oryx. We've entered a new area of the Dreadnaught that was otherwise inaccessible to us by passing through the Rupture. And everything at this point is focusing on anticipation of that confrontation with the protagonist, or the antagonist, Oryx himself.
All right.
Check it out.
Got another concept for this area.
Okay, put
This
that on
one
screen.
by Darren Bacon. And you know, we needed a really impressive door here. So we had this put together. It's explaining what this door would have looked like, what the macro shapes of that wall would have looked like.
And if we come back to our in-game view, definitely starting to use the environment to tell a story about Oryx's majesty. I mean, this is one of the more ornate, beautiful environments that we've seen, you know, and just the stairs leading up, this starts to feel more like you're in the king's court.
Right. One thing we strived for in the Dreadnaught was to make it a place that players would want to spend a lot of time. It started out pretty brown, a little bit sullen, and so we did a big push to bring in more magical elements. If you look out over this chasm, you can see we've got kind of the pixie dust in the air.
Yeah, you guys just pulled the encounter, just so you know. They're attacking.
We're starting.
We got Baddock? Okay.
All right, we'll fight them.
We'll do some sightseeing in a minute. Let's clear the area.
Yeah, so here's another combatant introduction, the Hobgoblins. They're great for this environment. They have this long-range sniper weapon, which might encourage players to just sit back and pick them off, but then they have this other ability that when you damage them, they fire these heat-seeking projectiles. So I felt like that was a great combination here. It's gonna encourage you to move down into these areas that have cover. Like where we started is pretty open, and you're not going to be able to take a defensive position. So those combatants are going to pull you down into this choke point where you have to cross this narrow bridge, which is great because with the encounter I'm trying to anticipate players making that decision, and then having a counter prepared for the AI. So they put a lot of pressure on this narrow bridge section. They're the scions that are splitting and multiplying, and a taken captain that can really punish you for getting in close too early before you've thinned out his minions. Although we made that look pretty effortless in a fire team of 3.
It's because we're awesome. That's an interesting point, though. You design activities that are good for fire teams, but also good for solar players if people embark on these missions by themselves. That's a consideration that you make as a designer.
Yeah, totally. And in this activity, I mean, we're about to go into the encounter with Oryx's henchmen, where the challenge level is really escalating. But I felt it was appropriate for the final mission against the Taken King. We didn't want it to feel like it was a foregone conclusion that you're going to overcome all these obstacles, right? So it's balancing that challenge level for all tiers of player experience.
Yeah. And then Hops, what were you telling me before we were so rudely interrupted by those Taken?
Yeah.
What were you telling me about the world that we see out there?
Well, we made an effort to bring a lot of color into an environment that could have otherwise been very brown.
Yeah.
So you can see the lighting team brought in some really nice color. You got the water down there is doing a lot as well. And this is another example where we kind of wanted to push the boundaries of the map. And if you pull your ghost out, you'll see some ways to get out there outside the normal gameplay area.
Yeah, there they are. And of course, begs the question, you've given me a reason to go down there, yes?
Yeah, absolutely.
Wonder if we have any data on how many people have actually done that.
Sure we do.
I'm sure we got data on just about everything. All right, are we ready?
Let's do it.
I'm following you. I'm going to occupy my usual spot in the rear with the gear. And there's the man.
Oryx, yeah. So this is cool. The design direction here, again from the lead, was wanting to sort of trick players into thinking that this was the final encounter.
Yeah.
And having it be a twist that, well, Oryx is not exactly going to face you now. He's got these henchmen. He's going to...
Still doesn't think you're worth his time.
Yeah, you're not really worthy. He's going to throw them in front of him and force you to deal with them first. This encounter presents a fair amount of challenge, and it's funny that internally they were we talked about them as Bebop and Rocksteady before.
Bebop and Rocksteady?
Yeah, I don't know exactly where that
Talk
came
about
from.
a working title.
Well, it kind of encapsulates the concept of them, right? They're
Yep.
his henchmen, and you develop a relationship with them throughout the campaign. You encounter them individually, and then here you're forced to fight them together, which was a novel experience.
He's not very pleased about that.
In Destiny, you've never been forced to take on two ultras at once before.
No.
I just remember early on working with other content creators, and they'd come to me with questions about these guys, and they're like, so which one is Bebop, which one is Rocksteady?
Yeah.
And I remember never being able to keep it straight. I always thought of, well, Rocksteady was a rhinoceros, and the Cabal are kind of rhino-like, so that's how I...
Yeah, the war rhinos. Not space turtles, but war rhinos. And I'm out.
So I can bring in the fact that in important areas you'll see much more of the crystal onyx and the gold trims, and that's an effort to kind of bring in the more regal palette of Oryx. So if you're seeing a lot of the black crystal onyx and the gold, it means the area has some significance.
Yeah,
and you'll see that when we get to Oryx Throne Room as well.
Definitely becoming a lot more opulent.
There's actually a progression of that in the raid when we go through that someday.
Someday. A raid along? Sounds like fun. I've already talked to Gavin Irby about making a repeat performance after playing Crota's End in front of the community. And that was Bebop, right?
Correct.
Bye, Bebop.
Yeah, and so the encounter design there,
Hello.
it was obviously a challenge to present those two highly lethal combatants to players and not have them be extremely overwhelming. So
Yeah.
the encounter has them separated for a period, and then they're sort of constrained into where they can move and where they can fire from. That gives you safe areas.
They get mad.
And then they get slightly more aggressive, and the ability for them to roam around the space opens up.
Yeah.
And then they go full berserk, and they tag team you. They actually both can enter either of the two halves of the space. And that cycle repeats throughout the encounter. But it's similar to the Oryx fight that we're about to go and take on. The intent was for it to be a really reactive challenge for players. Like they're presented with that threat, they have to take a position and then react to how the characters are changing the fight.
Ready to do it?
Do it.
All right. And we're through. What have we here? We've got
Oh yeah.
just escalating beauty. Hideous but beautiful, yes?
Just more reminders that you're on a massive ship.
Following Brian.
Yeah, so the next thing you encounter is this chasm scenario again, which, is intentionally completing the loop. Like you first landed, this was one of the first things that you saw, was
Yeah.
this chasm scenario, how do I get across?
Well, they're running away.
Yeah, so here we are again, and here I wanted to use these combatants,
Nice.
not just be an obstacle for you to fight and overcome, but have them be part of the player experience and the setting the mood. So they're actually falling back here in sort of a vignette, and they're drawing into this doorway that, obviously you're going to have to go and enter into that space.
Yeah.
Which is intended to be really foreboding and something you don't actually want to do.
Like an invitation. Do you have a concept for this?
Yeah, we've got one more concept here. Another one by Adrian Myshak.
Nice.
This was an earlier concept for this, so there was some changes made to it, but we brought in a lot of those elements like the waterfalls, which are actually going in reverse. If we come back to game, you can see how that has changed.
They're flowing upwards.
Yeah, the waterfalls
Yeah.
are flowing upward. Everything is flowing in, including the combatants, right?
Yep.
This whole moment is like an invitation. You come into this beautiful space, everybody sort of withdraws into the king's chamber,
Right.
almost as if to say, come with me.
And he rolls
Yeah.
out the red carpet. These
Yeah.
bridges don't have to be scanned.
Yeah, it's just, oh, let me make this easy for you because you have pissed me off enough that we're going to fight now. And this is beautiful. I mean, this is just, you're getting like gold filigreed steps.
That palette is starting to show up.
Nothing more ominous than a really, really big door.
How about a completely dark hallway?
Yeah, that's pretty ominous too.
Yeah, this is really cool. This experience was sort of designed and conceived of by the art director. So you enter this dark space, obviously very ominous. There's this flame that leads you down
To the logo of the game.
to the Taken
The
King.
sigil of the Dark King. Yeah, and we can pop our ghost just to see the room dimensions if we need to. I always like that effect. It's like, where am I going? Where am I going? We're not going that way. All right, meet you on the other side.
Let's do it.
Yeah, so I can talk a bit about the final boss encounter here. In a number of ways, we really wanted to take our boss experience another level, improve it, boss 2.0. And so that awesome introduction is part of it. You know, the visual effects team, Spec Ops team, did a ton of work to create all the components of him drawing in his power and,
Yeah.
and revealing himself and the flame hallway.
He draws the darkness into himself, almost suggesting that darkness isn't just the absence of light, it's a substance.
And then there was another goal of this encounter to have Oryx's actual participation become more direct over time. So initially he's using this ability that is draining your super, draining your light,
Yeah.
and that's like an indirect means for him to assail you. And thematically, I think it makes sense, right? He's like the Prince of Darkness, more or less.
Yeah. King of Darkness, even.
And as the fight progresses, his means of attacking you become more direct. So initially he has these ranged attacks, then he moves into a melee focused attack. And having him drain your super was a somewhat controversial, but very intentional design choice on my part. I wanted to pace out the encounter,
Yeah.
and not let fire teams just come in here and roll him over before experiencing all the stages
Yeah.
of the encounter.
Galley's up. Everyone throws a super. It's
Exactly.
over.
So, and then the other side effect that it has is he stops using that ability in the final stage of the fight, and it's timed so that your super actually will regenerate right in time for you to deliver that killing blow, and give you that sort of bull rushing at you
Grand finale.
experience. Yeah.
Now, the bull rushing at you. Nice metaphor. And again, here, just to take a look at this, I mean, we've seen, hello, I'm looking at art and he's right on top of me. We've seen this room in cinematics. We've seen him sort of conducting his army and firing his weapon from this platform. And now that we're here, it's obviously serious business. Hello.
Yeah, Andrew, do you want to talk about the palette treatment, the surface treatments?
Right, so kind of what I mentioned before, this room is overwhelmingly built up of that crystal onyx, and a lot of the architecture has this gold trim to it. You won't see any of the barnacle piles in here. That's a more Hive asset.
Yeah.
Or a less regal asset.
Yeah. This is a very elegant,
He keeps it
noble
clean.
space. Yeah, go clean your room, Oryx.
You can see he's switching to this more direct projectile attack that's firing
Yeah,
at players.
it's getting a lot more aggressive. Yeah, so his
More personal.
gold steps, his crystalline decorations. It's a very pretty space. Almost there.
There he goes.
Still no super. All right.
So yeah, the final stage here, sort of the Thunderdome, if you will.
3 men enter.
You see those obelisks I was talking about during the Court of Oryx in
Yeah.
here as well.
Now, our friends in the audience, if Thunderdome doesn't mean something instantly to you, you can't just see Mad Max Fury Road. You got to go get your back catalog. So here we are in the Thunderdome.
Yeah. So
And what role is Oryx playing? Because he's
Exactly.
not really fighting us directly.
yeah. So the player experience sort of goals for me here. Well, this was inspired by my irrational fear of sharks, and so I really wanted to channel that sense of, being helpless, being in the water. There's this apex predator that's circling you, and he's still sort of toying with you. He's going to come in and make these lethal strikes.
Thump, 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 thump. Okay, yep, that's a lethal strike. Here he comes.
It sets up the opportunity for that sort of bull rush moment where you put the final blow in.
Are we ready for the final blow? You guys ready?
think so.
Should we finish him off next
can
time
do
he
it.
comes in? Courtesy of Lord Saladin. Here he comes. Nope, there he goes.
Still toying with us.
Come on, man. You're a shark. Be the bad man, Oryx.
All right,
Be the bad
here
man.
he comes.
Here he comes.
Still got quite a bit of health.
Got slammed.
All right, last
One more. So yeah, I mean, and in terms of the challenges encounter, it's obviously much easier with 3 players.
Everything's easier with 3 players. Although I was able to finish this on the take home. I remember texting Luke afterwards going, that was really hard, man. He's like, that was perfect.
Yeah, you're going to get that super experience when you're playing this solo. It all time out just right.
There we go. Good job, fellows.
Nicely done.
Thank you.
Good job, nicely done. So talk to me about what's happening here.
Yeah, so
is
again,
he dying?
From the Books of Sorrow, it explains that here he's actually taking himself, and that inverts his throne realm into the Dreadnaught, and then eventually we're able to access his throne realm through the Court of Oryx because of that.
And it's at this moment that he quite literally becomes the Taken King. He becomes Taken himself, and this sets us up for the raid that follows.
Right.
So he's
Not
sort of
truly gone.
not truly gone. He achieves his final form and beckons you to come and find him in the King's Fall raid.
Right.
And perhaps we'll play that another time. But for today, this has been our ride along of the Dreadnaught. We scratched the surface. We did not see all of the Dreadnaught, but it's a big place, a ship older than time.
Right.
So it's been our pleasure to walk you around and talk to these guys and to hear from them what they think about when they make your games, what inspires them, what challenges them, how their creative process evolves over time. As a fan of Bungie games for a long time, I love stuff like this. I hope you do too. So it's my pleasure to thank senior world artist Andrew Hops.
Thank you.
Thanks for hanging
It's
out.
fun.
Thanks for building the Dreadnaught. And senior designer Brian Frank, thanks for filling it up with
Thanks for having us.
danger and agony and treasure
No problem.
and mysteries and secrets.
We'll do it again.
All right. All right. This has been a Bungie Ride Along. I'm Deej. It's been my pleasure to host you. We will be back next week. We're going to have a conversation with our audio team. This week, we suppressed the audio, the game audio, so that we could talk to these fine gentlemen. Next week, the audio and the things that you hear when you play will be front and center. We'll talk to the composers, we'll talk to the sound effects creators, we'll talk to the designers, may even talk to some of the actors. So tune in for that. Pay attention to the Bungie blog or any of our social media channels for updates on exactly when that show will happen. And, of course, let's talk about the fact that players of Destiny want new things to do. We have an entire team of people upstairs making new content for you to play. Over a longer timeline, we will be talking to you about that. There is a plan in the works for a spring update, and we'll start unveiling some of those details on a show just like this in the weeks to come. So please join us for future opportunities to learn more about Bungie and how we make games on Twitch. We'd be glad to have you. Any shout outs you want to throw out into the world before we go?
Nope.
All right, world, there you go. Thanks so much for watching. That's all we have for you today. Be brave.